Welcome back to part 2 of 3 for the cuff down socks. So we've talked about casting on and working the ribbing, and now we are all done with the cuff. This is 20 rounds of 1x1 ribbing, and it's time to move on to the leg. So let's first mark our last row here of the of the cuff, and I'm gonna do that with a red light bulb stitch marker. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick just a random stitch that's a knit stitch right here, and I'm gonna put this through there. And I might have to adjust it as I knit the first round of my leg, but now I've marked the very last round of my cuff. So I'm gonna be marking different sections with these red light bulb stitch markers, but as we knit the leg, I'm gonna be marking our rounds with some of my silver or gold light bulb stitch markers. So red's gonna help us distinguish between sections, and silver or gold is gonna help us to count rounds. All right, so when we're knitting the leg, we have some choices here. We can make a long leg, a short leg, it's really up to you. For most of my socks, I like to do 20 rounds for the cuff and then 40 rounds for the leg. That gives me 60 total rounds for the entire upper part of the sock, cuff and leg included. So I haven't quite decided what I'm gonna do here, but I will show you how I mark my rounds. So legs are really, really simple. For this sock, we're just gonna keep it vanilla, which means we're gonna knit every single round. So I'm gonna start the first row or round, and sorry that I just hit that, by knitting. So I'm gonna knit through until I get to that marker and make sure that it stays on the last round of my cuff, because that's gonna help me when when you make socks, you wanna make 2 matching socks. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark the rounds as I go here so that I don't have to measure, but instead I can count. So here I am on this stitch. And I'm gonna go ahead and knit past that. I'm gonna go ahead and knit this whole first side, and then we'll go back and we'll change the way our light bulb stitch marker is on here. All right, so our light bulb stitch marker is only connected to half the stitch. It's only connected to that right leg. So I want to change it so that it's connected to the entire stitch. So I'm just going to loosen it up, pull it back out here, make sure you can see it. And when I feed it back through, I'm going to grab that second half of the stitch. There we go. I always like them to be connected under 2 strands or an entire stitch so that it doesn't stretch things out as bad. So you can see that's the last round of our cuff, and I've already put 1 round onto the leg. I haven't completed it yet, but that's 1 round. So what I'm gonna do from here, I'm gonna flip over and start working the other side as I'm talking. I'm gonna start working the leg. I'm gonna do at least 40 rounds to show you. But I like to mark my rounds as I go, like I said, so you do not have to measure, but instead you can just count. So I like to mark my socks every 20 rounds. Some people prefer to mark every 10 rounds. All this means is that you're looking at that light bulb stitch marker, and when you have made 10 or 20 rounds past that, you stop and you put another marker in. And you do this every so often, 10 to 20 rounds, until you reach the desired length that you want. You're gonna see this same technique used when we do the foot of the sock, which is super convenient for making your socks exactly the same size. So I'm gonna work about 10 more rounds here, and then I will show you how I put in my markers to count. I've just finished working 10 rounds of the leg, and I can tell that by counting from where I place my marker, because the marker is in the last round of the ribbing. So if I kind of pull this tight, I know that this stitch is the last round of ribbing, and I can count from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the 10th one is on the needle. So I'll show you a different way to place the marker on this next part here. I'm gonna be placing these markers every 10 rounds for at least 40 rounds for the leg. So I'm gonna go ahead and knit to the same stitch where I placed the marker in 10 rows before. And I'm gonna place my marker on the row that was knitted before this so that I have 10 rounds marked. So I will show you what I mean when I get there. So I just knit the same stitch that this marker is in, and I'm going to go a couple stitches further. I like to keep all of my markers in the same row. Now I'm going to grab a different color marker because these are just counting rows, they're not marking sections. And I'm going to follow that up until I get to this stitch right below the needle here, this one right here. This is my 11th row, this is my 10th row, and that's the one that I want to mark. So I'm just going to take my marker and I'm going to go right in through that stitch and pick up the whole thing. There we go. I'm going to close the marker. Perfect. So I have the last round of that marked and I have my 10th round marked. So now I'm going to work 10 more rounds from here before I place my next marker in. I'm all finished working my leg now. I ended up doing 50 rounds. Usually I just knit until I'm kind of tired of working the leg and I'm ready to switch to something new. So I've been placing my markers every 10 rounds. So you can see the end of the cuff is my red marker here. And then every marker is 10 rounds. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and then I did 10 rounds past that to make 50. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my waist yarn now for my heel. I picked a nice bright pink to make it very contrasting so you can see it really well. You can insert any kind of heel here you want if you want to do a heel flap and gusset or a short row heel, but I'm going to be demonstrating how to put in waist yarn for an afterthought. It's really pretty simple. Before we put the yarn in, we want to check to make sure that we actually do have just half of our stitches here. So I'm going to count really quick to make sure for my 60 stitches, I have 30 on this side where I'm going to do the heel and 30 on the other side because I don't want to have anything wonky. So let me just count really quickly. I've got 30 on this first side here where I'm going to put my waist yarn, but I better still check to make sure that I did indeed cast on 60 stitches in the beginning. It looks like I'm all good, so I'm going to go ahead and push this first half of the stitches up onto my needle. We're just going to work this first half here to insert the waist yarn for our heel. So what I like to do when I'm adding a new yarn is go ahead and go into my stitch first, and then I'm going to come and get this yarn. You're not going to need very much of it, so if you just have like a tiny bit, that is plenty. All right, so I'm going to work this first half of the stitches just knit with my waist yarn, and this is going to come out, so it doesn't matter what color you choose at all. So I've finished working across half my stitches. In this case, I have 30 stitches. Now what I'm gonna do is actually turn. So I'm gonna work these same stitches back, but I'm gonna purl them. So it's pretty simple, just flip it around so that you're seeing the purl side, the inside of your sock. You kind of have to switch your needles around here. That part's a little bit awkward. Make sure your yarn is in the front. And then now we're going to purl these same stitches all the way back to the beginning where we started the round. I've finished that purl row. Again, I'm still working on half of the stitches. This is later going to become the spot for my heel. So all I'm going to do now is turn back so I'm looking at the knit side. And if you notice, your main color is still right here at the beginning of the round. That's what we're gonna pick up next. So we're actually done making this waste yarn rows. So you can cut or break your yarn. I'm gonna attempt to break. And that is all the waste yarn that you need. So that's all we're gonna do for the heel for right now. Now we're gonna move on to the foot. And I'm gonna work the foot just in stockinette. And again, I'm gonna place markers every 10 rounds, just like I did on the leg. It's even more important that each foot matches the other one, unless you have drastically different size feet, in which case you can totally make yourself custom left and right socks. So for me, I already know that to get the right length, I need to work 65 rounds for my foot. It took me some time to get there and lots of socks, but you basically just need to knit until you have 2 inches less than your desired length for the foot. So you're just gonna pick up your main color right where it was at the beginning of the round and knit these stitches. We're gonna continue to work in the round, basically ignoring this waste yarn until we're ready to put in the heel. And we're gonna put the heel in a little bit later once we've got our foot knit. All right, I've made it to the end of this row where I was working my waste yarn stitches. So now I'm just gonna continue like normal. I'm going to turn. I think I'll go ahead and tuck these ends from the waste yarn in. There's no need to weave them in or anything because they'll come out later, just so they're out of my way. And I'm gonna continue working in the round for the foot. So I will meet you back when I have got my 65 rounds for the foot and marked each 10 rounds. See you there. Before I continue on to do the foot, I want to show you what I do to prepare my sock. So when I take it out places, I have everything I need. So I know I'm going to need some stitch markers for the foot. So what I like to do is hook them on to the last marker that I've used. So they're just there. I'm not putting them in my knitting, but I'm just sticking them onto this last marker here. They're nice and lightweight, so it really won't matter. So there's a couple so that I am ready to go. And then also we are about to start a new part of our sock. So these 2 rows of our waste yarn are going to be the heel. And now we're starting on the foot. So I'm gonna get my red marker out. This is pretty easy to distinguish because I did choose a very contrasting yarn, but I'm gonna put my red marker in the last row of my waste yarn so that I know that this is row 1 of the foot to make it easier to count. Here we go. All 65 rounds of my foot are now complete. We've finished the cuff, we've finished the leg, we put our waste yarn in for our heel, and we've worked our foots. I've still got my markers in because when I make my second sock, I want to make sure I make it the exact same length. Join me on the next video to see how to work the toe, which will be our second to last section, and then we'll work our heel in a later video. See you then.